I wanted to ask you, Mr. Lando, is President Trump a Russian asset?
Absolutely not, Senator. He's the President of the United States, duly elected by the American people.
Well, the reason I ask is many people back home have been asking me this question. And they say, if he was an asset, we would see exactly what he's doing now. For example, he proceeded to forward or express from the Oval Office propaganda that has been Russian propaganda, that Ukraine started the war, that Zelenskyy is a dictator. Second of all, he gave away key things on the negotiating table before the negotiations even started, ensuring U.S. would absolutely oppose any possibility of NATO membership for Ukraine. Third, he's cut off the arms shipments to Ukraine, completely undermining their ability against a massive neighbor next door with short supply lines and huge resources. Fourth, he's undermined the partnership with Europe, which has been essential to security over the last 80 years, a major goal of Putin's. And then he's done everything to discredit and dismean Zelenskyy on the international stage with the just shameful press conference in which he teamed up with the vice president to attack Zelenskyy. I can't imagine that if he was a Russian asset, he could do anything more favorable than these 5 points. What else could a Russian asset actually possibly do that Trump hasn't yet done?
Senator, the President has made it absolutely clear that his top priority is to try to bring peace and end an absolutely savage war. I know you're familiar with the savagery. This is turning into World War I-style trench warfare now in eastern Ukraine. The President is an exceptionally gifted deal maker. He is probably the only individual in the entire universe that could actually stop this. The President understands, as part of his deal
well,
making,
let's turn to another of the folks here.
Carrots and sticks.
Thank you very much, since you're now off the topic I was raising. Mr. Whitaker, these 5 things that the President has done that are so favorable to Putin and so damaging to Ukraine and to our partnership with Europe, do you approve of them?
Well, Senator, thanks for that question. I'm just going to have to politely disagree with you on those 5 things and the way you've framed them. You know, the war in Ukraine would have never happened if President Trump was president in 2022. The war in Ukraine happened because of Joe Biden's weakness after his
I don't
withdrawal
think that
from
was the question I asked, but maybe you could some other time go on television and express those points of view. But do you mind just answering the question I asked? Do you agree with the 5 things that President Trump has done, starting with him expressing Russian propaganda from the Oval Office?
Well, you know, again, as I mentioned to your colleague, I am not here to assign labels. We're in the middle of a very important peace negotiation.
Okay, thank you. I do hope that we have an administration that works to get the very best deal for Ukraine, but what a Russian asset would do would be to work to get the very best deal for Russia, and that appears to be exactly what Donald Trump is trying to accomplish. I want to turn to USAID, and you've heard from my colleagues. We have a group, Mercy Corps, headquartered out of Oregon, that has contracts all over the world, places like Liberia and Kenya and Syria and DRC and Ethiopia. One of the things that I was really struck by was one of their contracts. These are mostly clean water, health care, nutrition contracts, helping people in desperate situations in partnership with the host nations, which is all about both helping people but also building that relationship with those nations. But in Liberia, the contract that was canceled provides support for school lunches for 146 schools and 25,000 children. I was very struck by this particular contract because when I was down in Guatemala, I was asking the president, what is the most effective program we have in Guatemala that he'd like to see expanded? this is a former president of Guatemala, and he said, school lunch program. He said, here's the reason why. One, our kids don't have enough nutrition. They're stunted. Second of all, the prospect of getting lunches at school gets them to school, and education is essential. He said, third of all, it creates local contracts for people who prepare the lunches, so it's a little bit of economic investment in every village around the country. Does it make any sense to cancel a program like that that is so beneficial in so many different ways and is done in partnership with the host nation?
Is that directed at me, Senator?
Sure.
Well,
Why not?
As you know, NATO is a different animal.
Absolutely, I know it is, but you have broad foreign policy experience, so maybe you'd like to, and maybe I'll just get quickly an answer from all three of you, whether it makes sense to cancel such a program.
So if I could hop in a second, the Secretary Rubio's waiver specifically covers life-saving medicine, medical services, food, shelter, and subsistence.
Very interesting. Then why hasn't this contract been restored?
Again, sir, I can just look at the waiver. If confirmed,
well, here's the thing. Let me just explain that the Solicitor General, Sarah Harris, said the funding freeze is not continuing. It is over. But the fact is the gears are not turning, and the gears have to turn in order for contracts to be restored and for aid to flow. And so we're talking about diseases overseas. We don't want people getting on planes with those diseases and bringing those, well, the fancy term, but Ebola-type style of diseases here to the United States, et cetera. And it is just double talk to say that the funding freeze is over when the gears aren't turning because administrations find other ways to keep them from turning, including having fired all the people who turned the gears. So I don't want to hear about the waivers when there's no sincerity in actually applying them and making the AID function again. My time's up. Thanks.